The quiet arrival. The morning sun had barely broken through the clouds when a small tour bus rolled into the city zoo. It was a quiet Tuesday. Not many visitors yet, only a handful of people stepping off the bus and stretching their legs. Among them was a man in a simple beige shirt and worn jeans. He wore a wide-brimmed hat that shaded most of his face, and he kept his head down. No one noticed who he really was. No one except a little girl holding a stuffed giraffe who pointed and whispered to her mother, "That's the man from the movies." But her mother just smiled and hushed her. "Don't be silly," she said. Keanu Reeves had come to the zoo alone, unannounced, without security or fanfare. He wasn't there for attention. He wasn't even there for rest. He came because he had read something that didn't sit right with him, something buried deep in a forum thread online, written by a concerned volunteer. It mentioned the name of the zoo and described a series of incidents involving the mistreatment of animals, specifically a baby chimpanzee. No photos, no videos, just raw words from someone who had signed off with "a voice for those who can't speak." Keanu had read those words over and over. He couldn't forget them. That's why he was here. The zoo looked ordinary from the outside. The entrance gate was painted with cheerful murals of elephants and flamingos. Speakers played jungle sounds as visitors walked through. Everything seemed fine. Staff smiled. Families laughed. But Keanu's eyes moved differently. He was watching everything. He didn't go straight to the chimpanzee exhibit. Instead, he walked slowly, observing the layout of the zoo. He watched how the staff interacted with the animals, how they spoke to each other, how they looked when they thought no one was watching. He noticed how one zookeeper seemed a little too loud with the lemurs, how another smacked the bars of a tiger's enclosure to get a reaction. Small things, but they told him a lot. When Keanu finally reached the chimpanzee area, he stood silently, at the back of the small crowd. A zookeeper was already there, a man with a loud voice, fake smile, and too much confidence. His uniform was crisp, but his energy was off. His name tag read Randy. Randy clapped his hands to get attention. "Ladies and gentlemen, today we're going to see something special. Our newest little star, baby Kiki, will show you how smart chimps really are." The crowd leaned forward. Parents lifted their kids. Everyone smiled. Randy turned to a small door in the corner of the enclosure and whistled sharply. A moment later, a tiny chimpanzee came out, barely larger than a house cat. Her eyes were wide, dark, and frightened. Her little hands clutched at a chain hanging from above. Keanu's jaw tightened. Randy began the show. He barked commands like clap, spin, and bow. And each time, baby Kiki obeyed, but not with joy, not with playfulness. Her movements were mechanical, slow, and trembling. Randy rewarded her with tiny treats, but also tapped a metal stick against the enclosure bars when she hesitated. The crowd laughed. They thought it was part of the act. Keanu didn't laugh. His eyes never left the chimpanzee. He saw the tiny scar on her leg. He saw the nervous twitch in her fingers. He saw something no one else wanted to see. Fear. A child in the front row asked, "Why is she scared?" Her father said, "It's just a game, honey. She's trained." But Keanu knew better. He knew what fear looked like. He'd seen it in war zones, in broken homes, in the eyes of stray animals on the street. And now he saw it in baby Kiki. When the show ended, Randy gave a theatrical bow and encouraged everyone to visit the gift shop. The crowd began to move, but Keanu stayed behind. He waited until the others were gone. Randy noticed him still standing there and walked over smirking. "You enjoy the show?" Randy asked. Keanu looked at him and said calmly, "No." Randy's smile faltered. "Oh, well, maybe you don't like animals." Keanu replied, "I love animals. That's why I'm here." There was a silence between them. Keanu's voice was soft but firm. "What you're doing isn't training, it's fear. And fear doesn't belong in places like this." Randy rolled his eyes. "Look, man, if you got a problem, take it to management." Keanu nodded. "I will." And with that he turned and walked away. But he didn't leave the zoo. Instead, he walked to the side of the building to a quiet area near the staff entrance. He pulled out his phone and opened the Notes app. There, he had copied the name from that forum post. A volunteer named Emily. He didn't know if she still worked here. He didn't even know if the name was real, but he was going to find out. He waited until a staff member came out with trash and asked casually, "Excuse me, does Emily still work here?" The man blinked. Yeah, she's on lunch break." "Why?" Keanu smiled. "I'd like to speak with her." The man shrugged and pointed toward a shaded bench near the employee cafeteria. Keanu walked over and waited. A few minutes later, a young woman with tired eyes and a ponytail approached. She wore a faded Zoo t-shirt and had a small notebook in her hand. When she saw him, her eyes widened. "You're..." Keanu nodded gently. "You're Emily?" She nodded slowly. "Yeah. I read your post," he said. Her hands trembled. "I thought no one would." Keanu looked at her with calm seriousness. "I did. And I believe you. But now we need to prove it." Emily looked around nervously. "They told me to stop asking questions. Said if I kept pushing, I'd lose my internship." "Then don't push alone anymore," he said. "I'm here now." And for the first time in weeks, Emily let herself breathe. They began to talk in whispers, sharing what they knew. Emily had kept records, notes, times, even photos she had hidden on a cloud drive. She told him about the after-hours training sessions, about how Randy was praised for his control, about the chimp's changes in behavior, and how other staff looked away. Keanu listened carefully. Then he asked her one thing. "Are you willing to speak up?" Emily hesitated, then nodded. "Yes." Keanu stood up. "Good. Then let's shine a light on the truth." What started as a quiet visit had now become something much more. He wasn't just going to expose the cruelty. He was going to make sure it never happened again, and he wasn't going to do it alone. This was only the beginning. The whisper in the shadows the next morning. The zoo gates opened just like always. Families with strollers, school field trips, and tourists from out of town filed in through the entrance, unaware that something beneath the surface had already begun to shift. But deep inside, behind the smiling faces and staged animal shows, two people were preparing for a confrontation that would change everything. Keanu Reeves met Emily again in the staff parking lot. She had barely slept the night before. Her hands were shaking as she handed him a small flash drive. "Everything I've collected," she said in a soft voice. "Dates, times, video clips from the cameras when no one was supposed to be watching." Keanu took the drive and looked her in the eyes. "You're doing the right thing," he said, "and I promise you won't be alone in this." They didn't have a clear plan yet. They only had truth and courage. Keanu returned to the Chimpanzee enclosure just before the next scheduled performance. Again, he stood in the back, watching. Randy was louder than usual, clearly putting on an extra show for a large group of children. His eyes scanned the crowd, and when they landed on Keanu, something in his face tightened. But he said nothing. He just kept clapping and ordering baby Kiki to spin, bow, and clap. The little chimp obeyed. But this time, she looked up toward the back of the crowd, toward Keanu, and her eyes paused, locked with his. There was something different in her stare today. Something more alert, more curious, and maybe, just maybe, more hopeful. After the show, Randy disappeared through the staff door, grumbling something to himself. Keanu didn't follow him. Instead, he made his way to the main administration building. He asked to see the zoo director. A woman in her late 50s with tightly pinned hair and glasses too small for her face came out. Her name tag said, "Ms. Clark, zoo director." "May I help you?" she asked, clearly distracted. "I'd like to speak with you in private," Keanu said. She raised an eyebrow. "If this is about the price of admission, it's about abuse," he said simply. Her smile dropped. In her office, Keanu sat across from her and placed the flash drive on the table. "I think you'll want to see what's on this." Ms. Clark hesitated. "What exactly is this?" "Evidence," Keanu replied, "of something you may not be aware of, or maybe you are. But either way, the world will know soon. She inserted the drive into her computer, clicking through folders filled with dated files. At first, she said nothing. Then she began to frown. The video showed Randy alone in the chimp enclosure late at night. It showed him snapping his fingers aggressively, shouting, throwing objects near the frightened chimp, and forcing her to perform tricks again and again. This can't be, she stammered. Your cameras recorded it, Keanu said. Your staff ignored it, and now your visitor, me, is going to make sure it doesn't get ignored anymore. Ms. Clark stared at the screen, the sound of baby Kiki whimpering echoing in her office. Her face changed. Something in her expression cracked. She wasn't a bad woman, but she had been blind to what was happening under her watch, and now she was waking up. Why are you here? She asked softly. Keanu stood. Because someone had to be. He turned to leave, but paused at the door. You have a choice to make. Either protect your animals and staff the right way, or watch this story go public. And then he was gone. Later, that day, Ms. Clark called an emergency meeting with senior staff. Randy was not invited. Emily was. Inside that room, Emily told her story. She told them everything she had seen over the past few months. The threats, the looks from coworkers, the moments she stayed silent out of fear. The room was silent when she finished. A man from the legal team spoke up. We could lose our license if this leaks, Ms. Clark said firmly. We deserve to, if we don't fix this now. Outside, Keanu sat on a bench near the chimpanzee enclosure. He didn't need to be inside that meeting. He had already done his part. Now it was their turn. As he sat there, he noticed a child walk up to the glass with a bag of snacks. The child waved at baby Kiki, who peeked out from behind a rock. For the first time, the little chimp didn't shy away. Instead, she walked slowly to the edge, sat down, and placed her tiny hand against the glass. The child placed their hand on the same spot. Keanu smiled. A few minutes later, Randy came storming out of the building. His face was red, fists clenched, jaw tight. He stormed straight toward Keanu. You think you've done something noble? Randy hissed. You've ruined my job, my life. Keanu stood slowly. He wasn't angry, just calm. Still. No, he said. You ruined it. I just held up the mirror. Randy stared at him for a long moment, then spat on the ground and walked away. Emily came out next. She sat beside Keanu, her shoulders shaking with silent tears. They're letting me stay, she whispered, and they're starting an investigation. They want me to help lead it. Keanu looked at her gently. Good. That's what courage does. It opens doors. She nodded. Thank you. If you hadn't come. He shook his head. You spoke up first. I just listened. For the rest of the day, Keanu stayed close by, making sure things were moving the right way. New signs were placed up near the animal areas, ones that read, enrichment, not entertainment. Visitors were educated on animal welfare. Shows were paused, replaced with observation and quiet learning. But that night, long after the zoo had closed and the crowds had gone home, Keanu stayed. With Emily's help, he was allowed one final visit. Inside the chimpanzee enclosure, he stood quietly by the door as baby Kiki peeked out from her bedding area. He crouched down, offering no treats, no commands, just presence. Slowly, carefully, she walked toward him. Her little hands reached out, and she touched his boot. And for the first time in a long time, she wasn't trembling. Keanu whispered softly, You're safe now. He stayed there with her until the moon rose high above the trees, watching her drift into sleep. The next morning, no one noticed when he left the zoo. He didn't say goodbye. He didn't need to, because he knew she was no longer alone. The cage and the camera. The sun was already high when Emily unlocked the side door of the administration building. Her fingers trembled slightly even though she'd done this 100 times. But today was different. Everything had changed since the meeting. Randy was gone. The chimp shows were suspended. And most importantly, Baby Kiki wasn't performing anymore. She was resting, exploring, starting to behave like a young chimpanzee again. Still, the air inside the zoo felt tense. Rumors had begun to spread among the staff. Some whispered that the story would go public. Others said Keanu Reeves had threatened to shut the whole place down. But only a few knew the truth, that he hadn't come with threats. He had come with compassion. That morning, Emily found a package on her desk. No name, no return address. Just a brown envelope. Inside was a small note. Keep telling the truth. K. Along with a brand new recording device and a high-capacity flash drive. She held the note to her chest for a moment, then slipped it into her pocket. Meanwhile, across the city, Keanu sat alone at a quiet cafe, sipping black coffee, watching birds gather crumbs from the sidewalk. He had planned to leave the city the day before, but something held him back. Maybe it was the chimp's eyes. Maybe it was the way Emily had stood up in that room. Or maybe it was the feeling that the story wasn't over yet. His phone buzzed. It was a message from Emily. You might want to come back. Something's off. He didn't ask for details. He just got up and left. Back at the zoo, a new problem had surfaced. One of the security guards, a man named Dale, had taken over Randy's shift. He was older, quiet, and had worked there for over a decade. No one really knew much about him, but Emily had noticed something strange. He spent too much time near the off-limits areas where old storage rooms were locked away from public view. When she asked what he was doing, he brushed her off with a grunt. That made her curious. That afternoon, Keanu returned, not as a visitor, but as part of something larger. Ms. Clark had invited him to consult on how to reform the animal care program. She didn't want to risk more damage to the zoo's reputation. But deep inside, she also wanted to do the right thing now. Keanu listened to the ideas, nodded, took notes, but his mind was already somewhere else. When Emily quietly mentioned the strange behavior from Dale, he tensed. Show me. They walked through the quieter parts of the zoo, past locked doors and faded signs. One door in particular had no label. Emily whispered, "This used to be part of the old primate nursery. It's been closed for years." Keanu examined the door. The handle was scratched. The floor showed signs of heavy foot traffic, even though no one was supposed to go in there. "Do you have the key?" he asked. "No one does. Only security." Keanu didn't speak. He reached into his pocket, pulled out a thin piece of plastic, and in one swift motion slid it between the door and the frame. The lock popped with a soft click. Emily blinked. "How did you—" He gave a small smile. "Movies teach you a few things." They stepped inside. The room smelled like mold and metal. Old equipment was stacked in the corners. Empty cages lined the walls. In the far back, a small cage sat under a hanging bulb, and inside it was another baby chimp. But this one was silent. Too silent. It sat curled in the corner, fur matted, eyes dull. There were no toys, no bedding, no enrichment. Just cold metal and loneliness. Emily gasped. They never said there was another one. Keanu knelt by the cage, his heart breaking. The chimp didn't move. It had stopped expecting kindness, stopped expecting anything. Just then, the door creaked behind them. Dale stood there, a flashlight in one hand, a radio in the other. "You shouldn't be in here," he growled. Keanu stood slowly. "Neither should that chimp." Dale stepped forward, voice rising. "You don't understand. This one's not like the others. It bites, it scratches, it's dangerous." Emily took a step back. "He's just a baby." "He's a problem," Dale shouted, "and I was told to keep him out of sight." Keanu's voice was low and steady. "By who?" Dale hesitated, then laughed bitterly. "You think that meeting changed anything? Ms. Clark's just covering her tail. She didn't fire me. She told me to keep the place clean. That's what I've been doing." "Cleaning," he pointed at the chimp. "No one cares about this one. He failed training. He wasn't cute enough. For the shows." Keanu stepped forward, his voice like thunder now. Then we care. And he's not staying here one more minute. Dale moved to block the cage, but Keanu's hand shot out, grabbing his wrist with force. Don't, Keanu warned. For a long moment, no one moved. Then Dale pulled back and stormed out. Keanu turned to Emily. Call Miss Clark. Now. Within 20 minutes, the room was full. Vets, administrators, and legal staff. Miss Clark stood frozen as she stared at the chimp in the cage. I didn't know, she whispered. Keanu nodded slowly. But now you do. The chimp, later named Nico, was taken to the zoo's recovery center. Emily stayed by his side, helping the vet team gently clean and comfort him. Keanu stayed too, quiet in the background, hands in his pockets, eyes heavy with emotion. As they watched Nico finally curl up in a soft blanket, Emily whispered, How many others do you think were hidden? Keanu replied, Too many, but every one we save matters. Ms. Clark announced an official audit of all animal facilities. Outside investigators were called in. Dale was suspended pending a full inquiry. New rules were drafted. Training programs were rewritten. But the biggest change wasn't in policies, it was in hearts. People were watching now, listening, speaking up. The next weekend, the zoo held a new kind of event. No performances, no tricks, just open observation, where visitors could sit quietly and learn about the animals as they really were, intelligent, emotional, and worthy of dignity. Baby Kiki and Nico were both there, in a safe space, surrounded by care. No chains, no fear. And as they played, something beautiful happened. They reached for each other, small hands touching, two young lives finally beginning to heal. Keanu watched from a shaded bench, tipping his hat down as a little girl sat beside him and said, They're so happy now. He smiled. They are. And for a moment he felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. Peace. Whispers beyond the gates. The week after Nico was rescued passed slowly, but something had clearly changed within the zoo. Staff who once walked with their heads down now made eye contact. Volunteers who used to whisper now spoke openly. And visitors, who once came for silly animal tricks, began to stay longer, ask deeper questions, and leave with a new sense of respect. The story had not yet gone public, but the ripple effect had already begun. Emily was in the chimpanzee care room early that morning. She sat cross-legged on the floor while baby Kiki played with a soft cloth doll, occasionally looking over her shoulder to make sure Emily was still there. Across the room, Nico was improving. His fur was still thin in places, and he flinched at sudden sounds, but he was beginning to explore again. He had even started to mimic Kiki's movements, rolling, clapping, and tapping the glass. Emily took notes quietly, jotting every little milestone down. A gentle knock on the door startled her. She looked up and smiled when she saw Keanu standing in the doorway. Can I come in? He asked. Always, she said. He stepped inside, removing his hat respectfully. They're doing better. They are, Emily nodded. But there's still more to fix. Keanu sat beside her. I know. That's why I'm still here. Emily gave him a curious look. Honestly, I thought you'd be gone by now. Keanu looked toward the chimps and said, Some stories aren't finished after the first chapter. Just then, Miss Clark entered, holding a folder tightly against her chest. Her face was pale. We have a problem, she said. Keanu and Emily stood up immediately. Ms. Clark continued. One of the senior donors pulled out, and he didn't just pull his funding. He told 2 other sponsors to reconsider. Said we're changing the zoo too much. Keanu frowned. You mean we're treating animals like living beings instead of puppets? Ms. Clark sighed. I agree with you, but money talks. If we lose 1/3 of our funding, we might have to shut down the primate program entirely. Emily's heart dropped. You mean relocate Kiki and Nico? Or worse, Miss Clark said softly. Keanu looked down, jaw tight. He'd seen this before, where doing the right thing cost more than people were willing to pay, but he wasn't going to let money decide the fate of innocent lives. Give me a list of your major donors, he said. Mrs. Clark blinked. Why? Because I'm going to talk to them. That afternoon, Keanu made calls. He reached out to CEOs, producers, philanthropists, and animal rights groups. He explained the truth. What had happened, what had changed, and what was at stake. Some people listened. Some didn't. But one call made all the difference. A woman named Nadia, who ran a National Wildlife Foundation, agreed to fly in that evening. "If what you're saying is true," she said, "we'll fund it ourselves." Emily, meanwhile, started gathering testimonials. She spoke to other interns, part-time staff, and even former employees who had quit because of how the animals were treated. She filmed short interviews, letting people speak honestly. Keanu helped her edit the footage into a simple, powerful video. By morning, they had something undeniable. A truth the world couldn't ignore. The next day, Mrs. Clark gave her approval, and the video was posted on the zoo's official page. Within hours it went viral. The title read, "A Second Chance for Our Chimps, The Truth Behind the Curtain." People around the world began sharing it. News outlets picked it up. Hashtags like Jimsire Save Kiki and Jardin Nico Hope trended across social media. Celebrities reposted it. Teachers played it in classrooms. Animal lovers sent donations. And then something even more surprising happened. Visitors flooded the zoo, but not to see a show. They came to learn, to support. Many brought small plush toys or bananas with handwritten notes tied to them. For Nico, "We love you, Kiki. You're not alone." One morning, as Emily stepped into the care room, she found a pile of drawings taped to the wall, childlike sketches of monkeys, hearts, and kind words. Someone had started a wall of love. Keanu walked in beside her and chuckled softly. "They're going to need more wall space." Emily wiped a tear. "We did this." "You did this," he corrected, but not everyone was happy. An anonymous email was sent to a local tabloid accusing the zoo of using Kiki and Nico's story for publicity. It claimed the whole thing was a stunt. The email even included an old photo of Randy smiling beside Kiki, with a caption suggesting she had always been treated well. The photo was fake, but the damage was spreading. The zoo's social media was suddenly flooded with mixed comments, support from many, but also doubt, attacks, and anger from others. Keanu knew what needed to be done. "We're not fighting back with more noise," he said. "We fight back with truth." So he and Emily went live. They streamed directly from the enclosure, showing Kiki and Nico in their natural, enriched environment. No chains, no commands, just care. They showed the recovery chart, the vet reports, the footage from that hidden room. And Keanu, standing beside Emily, spoke from the heart. "What we do to the smallest among us shows the world who we are," he said. "We failed these animals once, but now we're choosing better, and we invite everyone to be part of that." The live video got over 2 million views. That night, the tabloid retracted its story, and the anonymous email was traced. Back to Randy. Legal action was taken. But the focus stayed on the animals. Nadia, from the Wildlife Foundation, visited the next day. She toured the facilities, met Emily, spoke with the vet team, and then visited Kiki and Nico. When she saw the two chimps playing together, she smiled. "You've got something special here," she said. "We'll help you build it." And just like that, funding was secured. But there was one final surprise left. Nadia turned to Keanu and asked, "How would you feel about being the public face of the new animal rights awareness campaign?" Keanu hesitated. "I'm not in this for attention." Nadia smiled. "Sometimes the right face can open the right doors, for the ones who can't open them on their own." He looked toward Kiki and Nico, who were now playing with a soft ball made from recycled cloth. Then he nodded. "I'm in." From that day forward, the zoo became known not just as a place for animals, but as a place for healing, education, and truth. Kiki and Nico were never used for shows again. Instead, they became symbols of resilience. Every visitor who came to see them walked away with more than memories. They left with a lesson in kindness. And every once in a while, when no one was looking, a quiet man in a hat would return, sit near the enclosure, and smile. Because he knew This story, though born in silence and suffering, had become something beautiful. The voice they never expected, the morning breeze, moved gently through the zoo's trees. It was quiet, the kind of quiet that only comes after a storm. Most of the old signs had been taken down. The gift shop now sold books about animal behavior instead of plush toys that mocked them, and every visitor who walked through the front gate now saw a large banner that read, "Every life deserves respect." In the chimpanzee section, baby Kiki was swinging gently from a rope while Nico sat nearby, curiously pulling apart pieces of fruit. A clear divider gave them space but also connection. They were healing, slowly, quietly, but most of all, together, outside the glass. Keanu stood beside Emily. Both of them watched silently as the chimps moved with more confidence each day. There was peace in that moment, but it didn't last. Emily's phone buzzed. She frowned. "Keanu, you need to see this." She held up the screen. It was a news alert from a major media outlet. Headline: Anonymous source claims Keanu Reeves used chimp abuse scandal to boost upcoming documentary. Project Keanu read the headline without blinking, but deep inside something sank. The timing was no accident. Below the headline was a clip, one he had never filmed, taken out of context, showing him near the animal recovery area with camera equipment. It was part of a separate awareness project he had done a year ago. Someone had dug it up, sliced it, and spun it. "They're trying to flip the story," Emily said, anger in her voice. "They're making you the villain." Keanu nodded slowly. "And if we don't respond right, they'll succeed." By the time the sun had risen fully, online debates had exploded. Half the internet stood behind Keanu and the zoo. The other half now questioned everything. "He just wants attention," some commented. This was all a setup. Even worse, new threats began arriving in the zoo's inbox. "Shut it down or we will," one email read. The board of directors held an emergency meeting. Keanu wasn't invited, but Ms. Clark asked him to wait outside. He stood near the meeting room, hands in his pockets, back against the wall, while inside people argued. Some pushed to end all media involvement. Others said they should distance themselves from Keanu. Emily came to stand beside him. "What are you going to do if they turn their back on you?" she asked. Keanu looked at her, calm as ever. "I didn't do this for them, or for me. I did it for Kiki, for Nico, and for the ones we never got to save." Emily said nothing, but her eyes welled with tears. The door opened. Ms. Clark stepped out. "They're split," she said. "Half want to continue working with you, half want to remove you from all involvement until the heat dies down." Keanu nodded, then let them choose. That evening he recorded one video. No editing, no script, just truth. He sat on a simple wooden bench, behind him a view of the chimpanzee enclosure as the sun went down. And he spoke from the heart. "This isn't about me," he began. "This is about what we do when no one is watching, when no one is clapping, when no one will ever know the effort we made to do the right thing." He paused. "When I first saw baby Kiki perform, I knew something was wrong. I didn't know her name, didn't know her story. But I saw her fear, and I knew silence wasn't an option." He went on to explain everything. The hidden room, the abused chimp, the cover-ups, and how one brave intern, Emily, chose to tell the truth even when she was afraid. "I don't care about fame," he said. "I care about them, and I care about what kind of world we're leaving behind." He ended the video with one line. "If standing up for the voiceless cost me everything, then maybe that's what I was supposed to do all along." Within hours, the video spread. It passed 1 million views by midnight. By morning, it had crossed 5. People commented from all over the world: zookeepers, activists, parents, teachers. Some had been quiet witnesses to abuse in their own cities. Now they were inspired to speak up. The story wasn't just about a zoo anymore. It had become a movement. Chimp justice trended globally. And then, the unexpected happened. A former zookeeper from another state came forward. She shared her story of being fired after reporting mistreatment. Inspired by Keanu's video, she posted her own footage. And then another came forward. And another. Keanu's voice had become the spark for something much bigger. A few days later, the board of directors called another meeting. This time, they invited Keanu. He stood at the front of the room, looking every person in the eye. Says. Clark opened the floor. One board member spoke up. You've brought a lot of attention to us, some of it good, some of it hard. Keanu nodded. Another member said, but you've reminded us what our mission was supposed to be all along. To care, to protect. Then a third member stood. We vote to support this campaign. Fully, unanimous. They clapped, not for him, but for the decision to move forward. Honestly, bravely. Emily ran to the chimp room after the vote. Kiki and Nico were curled together in a corner, Kiki's arm around Nico's shoulder. She took a picture and posted it with one caption. They don't know what's happening, but they feel safe now. That's enough. Keanu walked alone to the enclosure later that day. The crowds had cleared. The noise had died down. He stood before the glass watching the chimps play in the fading light. And then something magical happened. Kiki walked toward the glass and placed her hand against it right where his stood, a silent thank you, a silent I remember. He smiled and whispered, we're not done yet. The world finally saw. The sky over the zoo was soft and golden as morning broke. It had been 6 weeks since Keanu Reeves first stepped through the gates unnoticed. 6 weeks since a frightened baby chimp performed under fear, since Emily found her voice, and since a forgotten cage was unlocked by truth. Everything was different now. The zoo no longer tried to hide its past. It used it to teach. And the animals once silenced were now symbols of something much deeper. Inside the chimpanzee enclosure, Kiki swung effortlessly from one branch to another. Nico sat on a wooden beam, clapping his hands and watching her like a proud older brother. They had grown. Not just in size, but in spirit. The fear in their eyes had faded. In its place was something soft and alive. Trust. And just outside the glass, something big was about to happen. A press conference had been called. Dozens of reporters stood waiting with cameras and microphones. This time the story was not about scandal. It was about redemption. Emily stood at the center stage beside Ms. Clark. She wore a simple shirt with the words, "Their voice matters," printed across the chest. Beside her, Keanu stood quietly, hands folded in front of him, his expression calm yet full of purpose. The crowd hushed as Mrs. Clark stepped forward. We began as a zoo, she said, but now we are something more. We are a sanctuary, a school, a mirror. And that change began because 2 people refused to stay silent. She gestured to Emily and Keanu. What started as a quiet concern became a wave of truth. And because of them and all of you, we now stand on a better foundation. The crowd clapped. Some cried. Emily stepped forward next. I was afraid, she admitted. I was just an intern. But what I saw couldn't be ignored. And when someone believed me, it gave me strength. And now I want to give that strength to others. Her voice cracked slightly as she looked toward the enclosure. Nico and Kiki saved me more than I saved them. Keanu finally stepped forward. The camera zoomed in. He didn't prepare a speech. He didn't need one. I've been part of a lot of stories, he began, some written, some filmed. But this one, this is real. This is about what we choose to do when no one's watching, when no one's applauding. He took a deep breath and looked out at the sea of people. When I saw that baby chimp trembling, I remembered something from my own life. I remembered what it felt like to be helpless, to be unseen, and I realized, even if I couldn't fix the world, I could change one moment, and sometimes that's enough. His words hung in the air, and then came the surprise. Nadia, the woman from the Wildlife Foundation, stepped up with a new announcement. We are partnering with sanctuaries across the globe, she said. We're launching a campaign called Just One Voice, and Keanu has agreed to lead it. The crowd cheered. Videos began playing on nearby screens. Real stories of rescued animals, brave caretakers, and recovered sanctuaries, all narrated by Keanu. The movement had begun. But the most emotional moment came later, when the press had cleared and the sun had started to fall. Keanu asked to see Kiki and Nico up close, without cameras, without crowds, just a quiet visit. The staff agreed. He entered the private observation area behind the enclosure. Kiki was there, sitting near a tire swing, while Nico climbed playfully up a branch. When they saw him, both paused, not in fear, but in familiarity. Kiki came close to the glass just like before, but this time, she didn't just place her hand, she offered him something, a small piece of fruit. It was her way of saying, "You're part of this now." Keanu laughed softly and touched the glass where her hand was. Nico jumped down, made a chirping sound, and rolled onto his back like he was inviting play. Emily stood behind him, watching. "You did something rare," she said. Keanu shook his head. "We did it." "But why you?" she asked. He thought, for a moment, "Because I listen. And sometimes that's all someone needs." The days that followed saw more than just visitors. Schools came for educational programs. Zoos in other cities called to ask how they could follow the same path. Celebrities donated. And most importantly, those once afraid to speak began to raise their voices. The movement grew. People all over the world began sharing their own stories of standing up for the voiceless, whether it was animals, the elderly, bullied children, or neglected workers. One voice turned into thousands. Months later, a mural was painted near the chimpanzee enclosure. It showed baby Kiki and Nico, in full color, swinging together with joy. And below them, in simple letters, they were never just animals. They were a beginning. Keanu returned often, always quietly, always respectfully. Sometimes he brought a book and read aloud to the chimps even when they weren't paying attention. Sometimes he just sat, thinking. Not about fame or legacy, but about presence. About the power of showing up. One day a little boy pointed at him and whispered to his father, "That's the man who saved the monkeys." The father nodded. Yes. And he didn't do it with magic. He did it by caring. Keanu looked over and smiled gently at the boy. Because that was the truth. He hadn't come to be a hero. He had come to listen, to believe, to act, and because of that, 2 tiny lives, and the hearts of many more, had been changed forever. And as long as people remembered their story, hope would never be caged again.